It's a long gospel text, so let me try to just search inside this text to find some teaching that might be relevant to us today. When you really take the gospel seriously, they can be disturbing. They can be provocative. So let's wonder what questions this gospel presents to each one of us as disciples of Jesus Christ. Some background on it comes from the 9th chapter of the book of John. And as you know, in the Gospel of John, there are no miracles mentioned. There are miraculous events, but they're all called signs. And there are 7 signs. And this is number 6. Next Sunday, we'll have chapter 11, the raising of Lazarus from the dead, the 7th and the last sign in the Gospel of John. Here we have a tension between the ministry of Jesus and the religious authorities. They are disturbed, the religious authorities, because Jesus violated the Sabbath. He kneaded clay with his spittle, and this was not allowed on the Sabbath day. They were legalistic thinking. And so you have this certain division of understanding about priorities and about things that are important and more important. The man was born blind, but this text was used in the very early church leading up to Easter as part of the catechesis for those who would be baptized at Easter. And so you'll watch the sequence, which we had last week also in the woman at the well, that the man begins by calling him Sir, and then he says, you are a prophet, and finally he says, you are the Son of God. You are the Messianic person. So there's a growth in faith. So let me take a look at this. Try to make this brief, but somehow meaningful. The religious authorities cast him out because he doesn't fit. He challenges them. He doesn't fit. He has no name. He's not named. So who is this man who is not named? Whoever he is a sign. He is a sign of the glory of God. God reveals through this man. But he has no name. He should have no name because there are many who have his name. Perhaps the woman at the well last week, the much-married outcast, perhaps she's the one that will not satisfy the religious authorities. Perhaps she is the one that's cast out from the institution. Perhaps she is another issue of this blind man. Who else disturbs us or causes us to be anxious or to make rigid, imperious decisions as the Pharisees do here? They never touch this man. They make their decisions from afar. You, a sinner, telling us who are pure about God's revelation. But Jesus touches him. Jesus connects with him. And therefore he goes through his conversion. So who is he? Perhaps he is the undocumented father or mother of a family in our communities that do not fit in to the thinking of the institution. Perhaps he is the one who disturbs us because of color or culture or sexual orientation. And therefore, we have to exclude that person. Whoever he is, he disturbs institutional thinking. And he becomes a disciple of Jesus Christ. And when I was thinking about this, I came to the ridiculous inquiry that perhaps I am the blind man. Perhaps I'm the one who was born blind. And in my journey of life, I begin to see Jesus the man, and then Jesus the prophet, and finally I get to a place where I say, Jesus is Lord and Savior of my life. And perhaps in saying this, in a radical discipleship, I don't fit always into the expectations of those in high places. H.G. Wells, familiar to us. When we were young, we all read H.G. Wells, Invisible Man, The Time Machine. He was way before his time, died in 1945. He has a story which fits in here. It just came to my mind, and I went back and recovered his story about the country of the blind. You might remember this. And very briefly, the short version of the story is, this man, his name is Nunez, and he's from Bogota in Colombia, and he is on the high Andes with an excursion of mountaineers, adventurous people, and he gets lost. He falls away from the group down into a canyon, and he gets lost, and the group depart, and they leave him out there by himself, and he wanders along, and he comes to a tribe of people who are all blind. They're unsighted. Something happened generations earlier. An infection set into these people, and it mutated right through the generations, and they were all unsighted, blind people. And he thought to himself, since I can see, a one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind. But he underestimated them. They had developed their hearing, their sense of smell. They were very conscious of the culture around them, of the seasons, and he couldn't somehow break through. Eventually, he falls in love with a beautiful young woman in the tribe, a blind woman. And he decides he'd like to marry her, but she has to get permission from the leaders. So the council of leaders meet, and they come to a decision that, yes, they will approve the marriage, but there's one problem. He has a disability. He has an infection because he can see. And therefore, we will approve this, but it will require a surgery. And after the surgery, you will be like us. And then we'll live happily ever after. And so he leaves and escapes back to Bogota from his place of beginning. It teaches us something about the manner in which we exclude people who don't agree with us. Who is it in your life that bothers you? Who is it in your life that creates a certain anger or reaction that makes you dig in, make hard decisions, make severe judgments? Who in the church is it that is not welcomed, that somehow they're excluded? They don't fit because they're not blind. And because they can see something we can't always see, we tend to exclude them, excommunicate them, send them away, so that we will keep intact the paralysis of our own thinking. This gospel, I found it very disturbing in a way. I said, wow, this gospel says something to me that I didn't want to hear. It says, change your mind. It's Lent. Of course, it's Lent. So I'll stop drinking. And when I get to the end of Lent, I'd say, thank God I conquered it. I'll give up, I'll make a sacrifice. But I won't give up my prejudice, and I won't give up my anger. And I will not give up my addiction. But I'll do other things. I will choose the sacrifice, but I will not embrace the sacrifice that's sent to me. Not chosen, just sent to me in God's providence. This gospel is provocative. It made me think a second time about many of the opinions and convictions that I have. And I suggest that it's worth taking a deeper look at this gospel. We could talk for a long time about the teachings of this gospel, but it's very invasive. And in many ways, this gospel is very demanding. So bring Lent to life in your journey. Bring Lent to life in the manner in which we will be converted. Our hearts will be converted. Our minds will change. We'll begin to see things with new eyes. We were born blind. We saw Jesus the man. We saw Jesus the prophet. And he disturbed us. And now we see Jesus as Lord and Savior, who calls us into a discipleship which, for me, is continuously renewed and new. Amen.